Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Renton, the Executive Director of Proofing Station, and we are so excited to be here today with Toyin Kolawole from Iya Foods, Proofing Station's second investment into Iya Foods that we made earlier this year. And so we're here to have a conversation, learn more about Iya, and take a tour of the facility. So Toyin, I know that you have a really rich background experience in the private sector, and then you pivoted into starting Iya Foods. What made you want to start a food company?
So that's an interesting story. It's kind of been a journey, so I'll summarize it as quickly as I can. I always like to start with how I grew up, right? I grew up second child, the first daughter in a family of 5. I grew up in Nigeria, grew up in Lagos, and I think for a lot of homes, particularly immigrant homes, the first daughter is like an assistant mom, so my story was no different. My mom, she's passed now, so rest in peace. But she had, the strength and the drive that we see in so many mothers, in attempts to feed their family and to create revenue. So my mom had multiple small home businesses. I always like to explain, really what I mean, because when people hear multiple home small businesses, they hear something that sounds rich and big. It was not that.
Yeah.
It was really, really small home hustles. For example, we sold water. And as the first daughter, every time when I'll be back home from school, I literally had to sell water. People are coming in buckets and buying water because we were one of the few families that actually had a pump and a well. We sold chickens. And when I say we sold chickens, maybe we had 5 chickens. So we had 2 for the holidays, and then we sold 3. So little things like that my mom did to leverage her background as a nurse. She had a small midwife business.
Wow.
She would help people who could afford hospitals to give birth. So she had many of those, right? And she would do whatever she could find her hands to do, just to create income for the family. So one of the final businesses she had before she started slowing things down and before I moved out of home was a fast food. So I would wake up in the morning, make donuts, make what we call meat pies, make buns, make different things. And I was the accountant, I was the baker, I was the customer service, I was sanitation. So I tell that story because it kind of illustrates kind of like the early entrepreneurial nature of my family. So as a result, you can see my entire life just kind of build on that. I went to school for management and accounting. Then I went to Kellogg at Northwestern. My major was entrepreneurship and innovation. I worked in a private equity company. That was my first job. Private equity is where you invest in businesses. Out of Kellogg, I worked at Bain, consulting for CPG food company. So the trajectory of my life has just always been around business and particularly around food. And I think the last thing that kind of like shaped the decision to start Iya Foods is I'm a mom. I'm a mom of 2 kids, and food is a love language for me. And like growing up, and a lot of immigrants I know identify with this, where they don't really hear I love you, I love you, I love you the way I do now to my kids. You were hearing things like have you eaten? Right? Because food is such a powerful love language. If you ask someone have you eaten, it shows that you care about that person, you care about their day. So food has always been a way where I bring my family together, how I show love to people. So it just kind of made sense, right, that with this entrepreneurial strength, my academic background, my career background, and just how I show up to love on people, food was always at the center of that. So that's how all of that came together to inspire me or motivate me to start Iya.
What does Iya mean?
So Iya means mother, but it means mom in a bit of an emotional way, almost like my loving mother. And it really speaks to the spirit of the way I viewed my mom while we were growing up, the kind of mom I am today, and just the role I believe I play in this world, which is just to love on people through food. And I think it's one of the most powerful things moms do. So Iya means my loving mother.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you talked about in the early days of the business, you pivoted from sauces to other foods. And then recently you've made another pivot from Iya being its own brand to doing more private label co-manufacturing. Can you talk about kind of those inflection points in the brand along the way?
I can. So when we started with sauces, I quickly realized that sauces was something that required high MOQs, that's high minimums, because there were wet sauces that goes in jars. So the amount of investment that you just needed to be able to grow that kind of product, especially very competitive space in the aisle, was a lot too much for me at the time. So I said, let me find something that I can do in smaller quantities that I can control, kind of like the key elements of it, or the key success factors of it, and just grow in a very gradual way. So that's why I went to dry mixes. So we started in a less than 1,000 square foot facility where I could mix even if it was just a 5-pound bag, and test it online and see how people respond to it. What became, I think, the most strategic, I want to say impactful pivot point, inflection point, was just the power of cassava in the U.S. market today. So because of my consulting or data analysis background, I could spot trends, right, and see what was happening. So I started to spot significant innovation around gluten-free, particularly around cassava. One of the things that has been public in the news today is the acquisition of Iya Foods, I believe by PepsiCo.
Pepsi.
Yeah, and it was acquired for $1.2 billion. I believe that's the largest gluten-free acquisition in the history of the United States, or at least in recent times. And a big part of what they use is cassava. Is why I'm so inspired. It's one of the companies that inspired me. So they use cassava, they use tapioca starch. Tapioca starch is made entirely from cassava. So it really illustrates what I love about the U.S. and what I love about being American, is that innovative spirit. The U.S. doesn't grow a single acre of cassava. U.S. doesn't grow a single, bag of cassava. But if you look at who is leading the world today in innovation about this amazing, scalable, sustainable product that, yes, is gluten-free but can be enjoyed by everyone, it's U.S. companies, right? You have cauliflower pizza. I believe they have tapioca starch in their product. You have Iya Foods. I mean, you could take 7 out of 10 of the most successful gluten-free brands today, and you'll see cassava in there. But you have countries like Nigeria, where I grew up in, which is number one grower of cassava in the entire world. But you see the U.S. leading in that innovation. So that's the beautiful thing about who we are as a country, is when you have this melting pot of ideas, of intellect and passion, you really always get the best. So I started to notice that, and I felt, this is exciting. I grew up with cassava. I know cassava. And I'm in the U.S., so I was like I had the best of both worlds, right? I could plug into this innovative spirit, into the market trend. This is what consumers wanted, and plug into my understanding of cassava, given that where I grew up from, my ancestral home is the number one grower of cassava in the world, and really try to create something that could make people's lives better, which is really, besides the innovation, is a big success factor why these companies are doing so well, is that consumers need gluten-free. You have one in, I think 25% of American households have someone who is either gluten tolerant or has to eat gluten-free. So imagine just that size of the market, right, that needs foods that people can actually enjoy, that are clean. This is something everybody can identify with, that we need better ingredients in our foods. We've seen the effect of climate change. We need alternative, sustainable, scalable ingredients. And then we see all these U.S. companies, right, U.S. founders responding to that need with innovative products. So that was a big inflection point for me, just personally motivating, but also just really powerful. And I was thinking about Iya and the strategic direction of Iya. And I would say it's probably the best thing that happened to us as a company.
Yeah. Tell me about your relationship with farmers and growers.
So that's another thing. When you're in food, and I think this is something that if there's any, food person listening, it's something I've actually enjoyed, kind of like a surprise of being in the food industry, is there's something when you're in food where you're just so connected to farming, and you're connected to the earth. I've never met a food entrepreneur, whether a startup or successful, that doesn't have this comforting, down-to-earth thing about them. It's something that is, I think, that's very powerful in food for me. You see me enjoy that, explore that through not just Iya, but my personal relationship with farmers. So to build on that, we work with a lot of farmers, particularly in Nigeria. That's something that is very personal to me. When I think about Iya's vision, it's really simple. We say shared prosperity and integrity of purpose. And the reason why, and I'll tie it to the farmers in a second, and the reason why that's so important to me, I'll use an analogy or an example. Let's talk about cacao. Cacao is what we see in chocolate, is what we see in chocolate drinks. We see cacao everywhere, right? Everybody in the U.S. knows chocolate. A lot of people enjoy chocolate. It's a big part of the U.S. CPG food economy, the food ecosystem. But I don't know if many people know that 2/3 of the world's cacao comes from 4 West African countries. I call them the CING countries, C-I-N-G. You have Cameroon, you have Ivory Coast, you have Nigeria, you have Ghana. But 80% of those farmers have never tasted chocolate.
Yeah.
You have a lot of them still very poor. And as someone who's an African immigrant, that story is so common, right? When you look at Congo and how destabilized it is, but you realize that we couldn't have our iPhones today without Congo. When you look at oil, I mean, you can't tell the story of developed economies without tracing it directly to Africa. We all know the history of slavery. I know it's a very uncomfortable topic. We cannot tell the history of U.S. and the growth of U.S. without the slaves or people that were taking as slaves of Africa. So the success of the world is intricately tied to Africa. So when I bring that down to food, and I think about just the billions of dollars or the prosperity that has been created from cacao, it makes me both mad and sad just to see how unfair that ecosystem has been to an environment that has been such a huge part of that. That's why shared prosperity became something so important to me, because my approach to it is not to guilt those who has created prosperity out of it. That's what they're supposed to do, is to say, how do we participate in the ecosystem where the prosperity is shared more fairly? So I felt that, we all can't solve every problem, but I felt I was in a position as an American and as a Nigerian to participate in the gluten-free industry in a way where the prosperity being created from cassava can be shared. So that's why we have shared prosperity and integrity of purpose, because I do believe very strongly that you can be a for-profit business and you can be good. It's personal to me, my faith as a Christian, that we really have to do good in this world. So that's why, coming back to farmers, that's why I knew that as I was creating this ecosystem, I would be complicit in the same problem if I'm not involving myself in building those relationships with those farmers, to say, sometimes something as simple as taking some of our cookies that we make, to say, hey, did you know that I made this cookie out of, and I have a sample of the cookie here, right? This is our chocolate chip cookie. I can say, hey, did you know that we made this amazing cookie from the cassava that you've grown for 3 generations? The first time I did that, I thought it was a small thing. But then the reaction was so, it stayed with me. I had one particular farmer who had tears in their eyes. And I didn't understand it for a second. I said, why is this so important to you? Why does this, impact you so much? And there was such pride.
Yeah.
In because when you're a farmer, right, across board, even in the US, the farmers and the farms are usually at the lowest in terms of prosperity, shared prosperity, the lowest in terms of appreciation. I'm guilty of it. Like when you go to your grocery store, you don't pick an apple and think of the farmer who grew that apple. So we're all guilty of it, right? So, and farmers know that. So to be appreciated, to be acknowledged, to be seen in that moment just felt so powerful. So there are other things we do in terms of paying fairly, in terms of making sure that their children, instead of being involved in farming, can go to school. And I know that's a sensitive topic here, where if as an American I think of children being on a farm, it's child labor, right? But when you look at families that grew up in the villages, the entire family being a part of the farm is a family activity. So there's balance there in how do we make sure that we're paying, they're sharing the prosperity where they can afford to send the children to school. So those are the things that I pay special attention to, because just to wrap it up, is that I do believe that you can be a for-profit business and be good. I do believe that as an American and as a Nigerian, I do have a responsibility to do everything I can in my lifetime to increase the shared prosperity that we're seeing in gluten-free industry that is partially off of the backs of this cassava farmers, of which Nigeria is the #1 producer. So that we're not repeating the imbalance that exists in cacao, exists in everything that is a resource from Africa today.
So Toyin, I know your relationships with Nigerian farmers are integral to the identity of Iya and your identity. We're also sitting here in Illinois and in the Midwest. Proofing Station's focus is the Midwest. Can you talk about your sourcing relationships in this region and why it's important for your business to be here?
I can. And I think that's one of the most unique things about being an American immigrant is that, when people ask me, I tell them I consider myself an Illinois. And I joke and I say my blood is in the cornfields. And I do believe that because when you, again, talking about the history of this country, so I do consider myself Illinois and consider myself, I'm fully American. And so what does that mean for me and how I deliver value? It's that as passionate as I am about shared prosperity, the emphasis on the word shared. How am I making sure that there's prosperity in Illinois? There's prosperity. I'm creating prosperity in Illinois. I'm creating jobs in Illinois. I'm creating opportunities in Illinois or in the Midwest. So that's why I said cassava. That's why I describe it as a part of the success story. So we do a lot with potato flour. I love potato flour. We do a lot with cornmeal. We do a lot with rice flour, both white and brown rice flour. So a big part of everything we do here is actually Midwestern. So that's why it's such a beautiful love story for me, because it all comes together really well. And that's why I call it shared prosperity, where we can create, if you think about the gluten-free industry and how it's growing, it's projected to be a $25 billion industry. So if $1 billion of that is supporting what we're importing from African farmers, just think about the rest of that can go to the potato farmer, that can go to the rice farmer, and that can go to the corn farmer. And now we're creating all these amazing baked goods that isn't dependent on wheat. Very, very important, because when people think gluten-free, at least at the beginning, they would think people who have some kind of gluten-free intolerance. But what I always use a simple example. I say, look, when you go to a steakhouse, and you order potatoes and steak. My husband loves a good steak, right? So you have a gluten-free plate in that moment, but you're not thinking about it that way. You're just enjoying, a really nice meal. So that's how we like to think about food, that in this climate change era that we're going through, as a world, we depend, I think, on 7 key ingredients. We have to diversify those ingredients so that we can feed ourselves. Because when you have an issue with almond, when you have an issue with corn, when you have an issue whether it's because of the climate with wheat, what happens? What happens to the world that we have to feed, right? Because you can take away everything from this world, but you can't take away food. As human beings, as living things, we need food. So that's part of the kind of like, I want to say, in our DNA of how we innovate is to make sure that there is balance in how we're sourcing ingredients. So for most of our products, more than 60%, some of them 80% actually are ingredients that are sourced from the Midwest, and that's something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many reasons why Proofing Station is excited about Iya Foods and why you're such a strong fit for our focus areas, but I think you just hit on them of, diversification beyond corn and soy and beyond kind of the dominant conventional agriculture that's been built up in our region. Thinking about other ingredients, both from a taste and cultural perspective that you've talked about, but also diversification on the landscape towards more resilient crops as well.
And that's why Iya Foods has been so happy. So one of the reasons I don't work in the company is this is my opinion as someone who is in the gluten-free industry and somebody who is a customer of theirs, is their products are just nice. Like, it doesn't matter. You could buy their tortilla chips and not realize you're eating gluten-free. You actually wouldn't know. It just tastes amazing. And they use clean ingredients. That's why I'm so passionate and so excited about their success, because they deserve it. They worked for it, and they have amazing products, and they've created things that everybody can enjoy. I think it's a story that we can all learn from. We can all be inspired by. Something inspires me, but it's just a perfect example of what you're talking about. Of these are folks that diversified the typical tortilla ingredients and created amazing products that everybody can enjoy, and we're able to scale it up because the ingredients that we're using were not just alternative ingredients, they were sustainable and they were scalable. Yeah, so that's amazing, an amazing story that I like.
Yeah, you have a rich experience from the private sector, investing yourself. You've built this incredible facility. Yeah. There's a demonstrated need for gluten-free, allergen-free products.
Yes.
And yet, I know that raising capital remains a challenge.
It is.
Can you talk about what that journey's been like for you and some of the needs you see for more capital and more flexible capital to support businesses like Iya?
I'm one of the lucky ones, and in terms of raising capital, despite that, it's been incredibly hard. And we all know the data. I think the data is something like less than 1%, some less than 6% go to minorities. And in those minorities, you have not just Black people, you have Hispanic, you have women, all women. When you narrow it down to, let's say, Black or Black women, that number is it's almost close to 0%. So you can imagine that we've existed in a world where more than 94% is going to white male in the world we're in.
Yeah.
And when you look at the success story for gluten-free, particularly when you talk CTA, when you talk simple meals, when you think about cauliflower pizza, none of that are within that group. And this is why I'm such a huge supporter of DEI. And I know it's been, in some circles, it's being fashioned as a dirty word. And here's what I always tell people, that DEI is not an indicator of the lack of competence of whether it's women, white women, Black women, Hispanics, Black. It's not a statement on their abilities or competence. No, DEI is a statement about the status quo, and asking them in ally ways, in kind ways, in ways full of grace, to take a mirror to how they're picking, whether it's people or businesses that they're giving resources to. It's one of these why I'm passionate about what you guys do, is saying, let's broaden the pool a little bit and say, because human beings, we tend to be self-selected. So if all of the money is going to one particular group, but we know just by common sense that the ability to think of good products, the ability to think of good ideas is not limited to one particular group. We've seen that in Iya Foods. We've seen that in simple meals. Then let's expand how we're thinking about this, because it creates opportunities for everybody. I would not have been able to raise funds today if it wasn't for resources that made a specific effort to support women-owned businesses. If it wasn't for resources that made a specific effort to support Black-owned businesses. And this is despite my background of having gone to Kellogg, of having worked in one of the top consulting firms, of having the knowledge, the intellect, to be able to do these things. And I couldn't raise funds. So that's why I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that it's important that people understand that it's not a zero-sum game, that supporting diversity of founders is not taking from another group. It actually makes all of us better, because it creates more wealth, it creates more job opportunities, it expands. It expands the market. So that's why, I really do enjoy talking about this topic. But coming back to kind of like, I think what the nucleus of your question is how I was able to raise funds. It was hard. I want to say we have 4 investors right now, and almost, except with the exception of one, all of them are funds that are intentional about making sure that they provide opportunities across the entire makeup of America. And even with that, I do believe that the risk profile is often higher, whether it's intentional or subconscious. The funding opportunities are less, because there are fewer opportunities for that. So when there are fewer opportunities for that, there's higher competition even within the group that is being provided the same opportunities. So it's something I'm going to continue to be an advocate of, but it was hard. Even with my background in accounting, in finance, I started my career in private equity. With all of that, it was incredibly hard. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the opportunities that Iya has benefited from Proofing Station, from our other investors.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be that hard, right?
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. But imagine, I remember when Iya Foods, I think in their first 3 years, I'm not 100% sure about the numbers, I think it was like $90 million that they got. If they didn't get that funding, they won't be a $1.2 billion company today, right? They wouldn't have created amazing products that we can all enjoy, right? We have more and more kids who have to be gluten-free. Yeah. So when you're a mom and you have a kid that is special needs, and you know that kid is going to thrive better if they're eating gluten-free. Now you have a CTA that you can go, you have simple meals you can go to, you have Iya that you can go to, you have all. So really when we do this, when we provide this type of opportunities, it really is, I really believe that it really makes us better as a nation, as a community of people, because what are we doing? We're creating solutions, right? And those solutions solutions that everybody can enjoy. So when Puffy Station invests in Iya, Puffy Station is investing in America because we create products that everybody can enjoy. We're creating opportunities for the rice farmers. So it's something that has this amazing multiplier effect that benefits all of us. But I'm hoping that, I think it is getting better, that my lifetime is going to continue to get better, so that funding resources are not self-selecting. And by self-selecting one group of Americans, it's automatically excluding some set of Americans. And I'm hoping that those lines blur more and more because we'll all be better for it.
Investing in underserved market players is one of Proofing Station's core focus areas. And I think that's, reflecting everything you just said, one, just a recognition of the historic and current, unfortunately, inequities in distribution of funding, but two, recognizing the diversity that's in our region. I think there's misconceptions about who lives in the Midwest, who farms in the Midwest, who are the CEOs of companies in the Midwest. And so I think it's a recognition that resources should be going to these amazing businesses that then provide us with all these delicious, culturally relevant, exciting products as well that everyone can enjoy.
Also, it's that also the consumer market is changing, right? Like my children are American born, and to them, Chipotle is an American restaurant. Panda Express is American. And I always laugh when they say that. And you do know that the history of that, right? You do know that Panda Express is Asian. So it also when you think about the evolving consumer market, you have younger people who are spicier, right? And that's why you have spicy products that are doing well. So it's just, when we provide these opportunities in a diversified way, we're always better for it. Always. Diversity is one of those things that, just always produces better results. And I always like to remind people that it's not a zero-sum game. It really does create opportunities for all of us. And it's part of why I believe that American innovation is unmatched. Is really because we have all of this melting pots of ideas. Because when you're think about this, when you're thinking of a product that has to serve someone in Iowa who maybe is white, has to serve someone who of Mexican heritage, maybe lives in Illinois, has to serve someone who is black. When you think about a product that has to serve these various things, how is it possible that you don't come up with something that's amazing? Because you have this diversified consumer market that you have to think about in how you're innovating. So by default, you become the best innovator, and that's something I think that keeps America on top. And if we want to continue to be the best at what we do, has to be continuously in the DNA of how we're thinking about products.
So let's talk about infrastructure. Regional infrastructure is another one of Proofing Station's focus areas. Understanding, as we've talked about, as we diversify what the Midwest food system looks like, we've really hollowed out a lot of infrastructure in our region with such a focus on sort of large-scale commodity crops. And so you have built significant infrastructure for Iya Foods, and also to benefit other brands who can now use your facility as a co-packing, co-manufacturing facility. Can you talk to me just about kind of the journey of scaling your own infrastructure and what the needs you've seen and plans for growth?
So the importance of that, I think, became more apparent to me during COVID. When, the whole world, if you were a country that didn't have a solid infrastructure, the impact of COVID was bad on everyone with their lives. But countries that didn't have, or environments that didn't have adequate infrastructure, were even harder hit. So the importance of essentials, essential products, essential services even became more obvious during COVID. So that's when I started thinking that, I got to expand beyond where we were, which was at the time, I think, under 2,500 square foot, and involve ourselves more in manufacturing and building infrastructure on a larger scale, but not just on a larger scale, particularly for gluten-free. Because even today, we still have less gluten-free infrastructure and manufacturing capability than the market needs, and than the market is growing at a lower rate than the market for gluten-free is growing. So that was a second part of it. A third part of it is the importance of Illinois, right? As an infrastructure state, as a manufacturing state, became so important, right? We have coastal states that They can make money from import. They can make money from export. They can make money from hospitality. But when you are landlocked, essentially, I know we have some access, but when you're landlocked like we are in the Midwest, building yourself as that hub of not just of manufacturing and distribution becomes even more important. That's why you saw during COVID, you saw more investment in Illinois from Amazon, from logistics, from distribution. So when other states were maybe getting really hard hit, even though we're also hard hit, we had this opportunity that was created in the middle of all this chaos where companies realized that they had to expand their logistics, right? They realized that they had to expand their infrastructure, and that was across board from the really large ones. Like one of Amazon's largest robotic center, I believe, was built in Illinois just around that time. So you had the big ones that were putting billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. But that's the beauty of America, right? It filters through to small businesses too. You have small businesses like us that said, okay, we got to answer this call. And that's why we moved into this facility, which used to be an old YMCA. Yeah. And we moved from under 3,000 square foot to just under 40,000 square foot. We moved from $250,000 in equipment to over $5 million in equipment to say, you know what, we're going to be part of the solution of how do we fortify our position, our value to the American economy. Because I always tell people, food security is national security. But if you don't have food, you have a problem on your hands. You have serious problems on your hands. So, being able to be a part of that American ecosystem for the future, for us in food, for us in gluten-free, was a big driver in how we're expanding infrastructure. And that's something I hope to see more of in Illinois, such that Illinois becomes one of the most important states in the United States for manufacturing, for infrastructure, particularly for food infrastructure. And I think you will see that you always know when a trend is real and data-driven when you see private sector and public sector. So when you look at the governor's plan for Illinois, you're going to see manufacturing as a big part of that. You're going to see distribution, logistics. You're going to see all of that as a big part of that. But also when you see the private sector, right? You have companies that are building here. You have 500,000 square foot facilities for food. So we're a smaller part of that. But I think the more and more you see of that, the more we can continue to establish Illinois as, for speaking specifically about my industry, as a food manufacturing hub and as a logistics and distribution hub. And I think that's going to be important to the future of Illinois going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many reasons why the Midwest is so special and so unique. There's so much opportunity here. There's this legacy of being the breadbasket of the world and having so many kind of legacy food brands and companies here. But there's so much opportunity as well to make new markets and to really go back to growing and selling food for people. The Midwest, if you look at maps of agriculture in the Midwest, it's corn and soy that's going towards energy and to livestock. And so how can we bring that back to your point about food security, but also just the opportunity to feed our communities.
And it's more about expanding as opposed to, I understand what you're saying, because all the things about the way it's going into energy and going to all these other sectors can continue and can grow. But how do we expand that, right? How do we say, okay, we can do the same in food such that, and also we talked about shared prosperity earlier, how do we make sure that Illinois continues to benefit from that expansion in food? Like I'm envisioning a time when Illinois is a center and a hub for food investments, right? And Illinois is a center and a hub for innovation, such that if we have, like I would like to if Seattle was here, right? Simple Mills is here, such that maybe my goal is that 30% of the innovations we see in food in America should come from Illinois, and we can do it. Why not? And then that way we're using products that are Midwestern. And those products are manufactured here. Those products are distributed from here. I just imagine the jobs or the ecosystem that we can create with that kind of vision. So that's my hope and my vision, that we as Iya can contribute just a little bit towards growing Illinois to be at least 30% of the U.S. food ecosystem. And I think we can do it. So Courtney, one of the things I think I thought about when I first met you guys at Puffy Station is why what was it that formed the strategy or the passion for investing in underserved? For three things: in underserved founders or businesses, particularly in food, and the focus on the Midwest. What were the things that informed that?
Yeah, I think a few different things. So, one, the research pointed us in those directions. So when Proofing Station was forming, we had amazing founding funders and subject matter experts and people who, were really passionate about getting more catalytic funding into this region. And we're noticing that there were other funds that maybe existed on the West Coast in California or on the East Coast, but that we didn't have that same kind of catalytic, flexible capital in the Midwest. So observing that need and knowing that there was this gap between philanthropic funding, so grants that could go to nonprofits or maybe really early stage companies, and then more traditional lending. And so there were businesses, amazing businesses, farms, food businesses, infrastructure that were kind of falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
And so, that really led to kind of what our 4 focus areas were. That's what the data was pointing to.
Yeah.
But then I think, on a more emotional level too, everything that you've talked about already, of just knowing that there are these incredible diverse businesses with founders with amazing backgrounds who are getting overlooked, and who, we have projects in our pipeline that are meeting barriers in the system that would drive incredible impact, would kind of lift entire supply chains or build resources for communities, and they can't go to a bank.
Yeah.
They're not fundable, they're not investable. And so, or they're not driving, even for traditional impact investors, 8, 9, 10% returns. And so for us, I think that really drives the thesis and the strategy behind Proofing Station is, wanting to follow the data and what the needs and the gaps are, but also just knowing that if we can invest in Iya Foods across the Midwest region, what would that look like in 10 years at the end of the fund? And I think achieving this vision that you were talking about of Illinois and the Midwest really being this hub for innovation and investment, so that we hopefully can demonstrate the impact of our funding and of businesses like Iya, and pull in other funders and investors who maybe have been a little scared, or they don't know a lot about the Midwest, or they wouldn't have maybe looked at certain businesses before because they didn't deem them as investable. So we're kind of here to take on that risk, to provide that catalytic capital, and then hopefully to kind of launch the whole region. Yeah.
The things you said reminded me of something that I think stuck out when we initially met Proofing is you didn't go the traditional private equity or venture capital route, right? You're right, because they have all these exit multiples, they have all these investment criteria that even with a desire to invest in smaller, underrepresented funds, it just automatically, cuts them out.
Yeah.
But you guys decided to go the not-for-profit route.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So was it? Just talk a little bit more about that, and then what was the key thing? If you had to pick one thing that drove that decision, because I'm sure they considered it to say, do we go the traditional private equity route or go through a non-for-profit?
Yeah.
What was the driving, and I know you've alluded to some of it, but what was the real driving factor behind that?
We chose a nonprofit model because of flexibility. So we looked at a variety of other models, whether it was, impact investing, CDFIs, there's all these amazing tools out there.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to be an additive tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
And so structuring as a nonprofit allowed us flexibility where we can look at loans, we can look at equity investments like we did with Iya. We can really be creative in the solutions that we can offer in a way that other models would have made more difficult.
Yeah.
And then I think also just to live true to our values of really being impact first.
Okay.
So, we run a fund, and, we still have robust due diligence. We do our homework. We're really looking for strong investable opportunities, but at the end of the day, we have a very different mandate. We have amazing funders and investors into Proofing Station who understand what we're trying to do, and our mandate is principal preservation and return of capital. And so that allows us a lot more flexibility in the tools, the financial products and tools that we can offer to the businesses that we're working with to really meet our mutual goals that are impact first and not purely returns driven.
So I noticed, I don't know if this was intentional or it just happened, is that even in the makeup of your fund,
Yeah.
Like the other lady I met the other day with a farm, a woman, and you have one of your colleagues ran a bakery or food business, and there's you with your background. So even in the people making the decisions, there seem to be kind of like a different mix of decision makers that I'm used to seeing in private equity. So was that intentional or it just happened?
I think it's intentional, okay. and I think it's people who get what we're trying to do.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, but I can tell you exactly. We've been on calls where we're meeting funders and we're having our initial conversations and get to know yous. And for us to be able to share what our background is, that we have team members who have built their own successful businesses, that I've spent time working with farmers and food entrepreneurs and providing support. It's been amazing how much that's opened up, I think, trust more quickly and that we can speak each other's language. Certainly, every food business is different. Every model's different. There's so much to learn, and we want to really get into the details so we can understand each business. But I think there is a bit of a shared understanding and maybe a head start that we can jump right into, the details and kind of the heart of the challenges that businesses are facing, and just have that background and shared language.
I like that about when I met you guys up there because it added I talk about shared prosperity. I think it added a shared humanity to the way we're having conversations, right? Because a lot of, your team has been in the weeds. They understand the hardships and the challenges of being an entrepreneur, especially in the food industry. And that was very, very fresh and amazing to see. And I knew that I was talking to I knew also people who were really not just serious, but who really understood what they were trying to do, and that was refreshing for me.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So Toyin, everyone's going to watch this and they're going to want to know immediately, how can I find Iya products? How can I support Iya Foods? So what can we tell people about where to go?
Thank you. They can go to our website, iyafoods.com. We have multiple sections there, but we have one where you can shop our products, or they can go to Amazon to shop our products, and we look forward to, serving people. Thank you. Iya has been fortunate to have access to proofing and to be successful in raising with Proofing Station, but for other entrepreneurs watching and they wanted to reach out to Proofing Station, understand better about the criteria, or figure out how to get their business plan to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, great question. Please reach out. So our fund is open. We have an intake form on our website that anyone can fill out. You just go to proofingstation.org, and that'll get the conversation started. We'll reach out to you. We'll have a call. We'll start collecting information, and we can share more with you about our 4 focus areas and how we evaluate investments. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and with Toyin, and for learning a little bit more about Iya Foods and about Proofing Station. And we'll see you next time.